I forgot to talk to you about, this is, I guess, inductors part 2. As far as inductors go, there are different cores that you can use. In this case, they use a steel laminate core. And you can also use just regular steel. You can also use ferrite. You can also put the ferrite, it's most effective down the center of the coil. You can also, if you want a higher power handling and a higher saturation wattage point, you can run air. You can do an air inductor, where it's an air core, meaning no core. You can also put ferrous metal, like ferrite, which is, you know, the same thing that you see in the magnets and things like that. You can just put it near the inductor to get some of the effect that you want. Like if you're limited on size, on how big you can make the inductor, you can actually put stuff, and it's great to have an LCR meter like this so that you can do it live. And you go, okay, that's reaching whatever millihenry or whatever you're trying to reach. And that's an easy way to add more inductance without adding more windings, is simply put ferrous materials around. Again, you want to follow the rules and the properties of crosstalk. You want to avoid crosstalk into other inductors, induction into other inductors, just because it causes other problems sometimes that you can't. Again, passive components get really complicated because when you change one thing, sometimes it changes several other things. And typically what you see in somebody like North Creek, I used to follow them a lot, North Creek Music. It was just probably some old guy in his shop building hand-made crossovers and putting some VIFA and ScanSpeak drivers and stuff like that together in really nice wood cabinets and all that stuff. Some of their passive crossover boards are super complicated. And the only real way to do it that way is with a computer. And if you're using a computer, like, why are you using passive crossovers in the first place? So again, I'm not a real fan of passive crossovers, but they are very simple and they can be effective, if used correctly. And again, you don't have to be super exact, and you don't have to have a 12 or 18 or a 24 dB slope. That doesn't matter either. So again, it's sort of like a lobbing, like a ring toss. Like there's not one way to throw a ring to get it around the whatever you're doing. There's several different ways to do it, and that's why they have a Linkwitz-Riley, Butterworth. What's the other one? There's like 20 different ones that show a different curve and all this kind of stuff. And again, can you hear that? Can you hear the slope? Can you hear the curve of the roll-off? No. So there's a lot more involved than just the math and all the other stuff. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, it's funny, I remember in the Loudspeaker Cookbook, it talks about counting the windings in order to calculate the inductance, which is super hard. And that's why I found this method. I think I picked this up from a fellow speaker builder when I was in the Air Force. I was probably, 20, 21 at the time, and he's like, yeah, if you really want to do it, you need a digital LCR meter, and then you can do it on the fly. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so then I started making them, and I used to make 18, 24 dB, all the kind of slopes and all that kind of. Did I know if they were good? I don't know. They sounded great, so that's all that fucking matters. And then later I realized I could get passive crossovers using car audio stuff if I just ran 4 ohm. And so then you're like, do the speakers care if they're running 4 ohm at home? No, there's so many other things and so much other information I want to talk to you about. But again, it's better if you read books and then you can absorb the information better on your own, because sometimes when I make a video like this, it causes more questions than it answers. And you guys, I understand that you're excited and you want to learn and everything like that, but really the best way to learn is reading books and understanding it and what it means in your head, and then trying it, right? And that's the whole school system, if you really think about it, all the education stuff. You just read the book, and then you go in the next week or whatever, and then they do lecture, and you talk about it, and that's when you go, hey, I read this, I didn't quite understand this, and there's sometimes a Q&A. This is like college level stuff, or even high school, and then there's typically a quiz or a test at the very end, and to sort of test your knowledge. And I don't really like those because they sort of just quiz what you remember, not necessarily that you've learned something. So anyways, that was the follow-up and things that I wanted to do. But again, I used to experiment with that kind of stuff, and what they don't really talk about is saturation point. Saturation point is where the inductor can only take so much power, and it can also only sink away so much heat, that's wasted. And these do waste heat. This is, see, you know, it's very, very sensitive meter. These do, there is a resistance on this. I'm not even counting it because it's such a waste of time to calculate or even compensate for. It's not even worth your time. So does this device right here knock off some of the highs? Yep. And that's what that's all it's meant for. So I'm using these in a 3-way setup. We're using I think you got the RD65s, and the RD65s come with passive components that divide between the tweeter and the mid. And for the mid, he's using the Recoil RMS35, which is a Neo mid. I think I've talked about that. I showed it in another video. And so that's what you would use those passives for. And then on top of that, you want to use a high pass filter for the mids going into the crossover, right? Which is going to be 50 microfarad, 100 volt, which is good for a 400 hertz roll off, 6 dB, for 4 ohms. So there you go. And so what do you know? You provide an inductor to lop off some of the highs. Now when he's actually playing around with it, and I'll tell this to him in the instructions, is that you may want to try it without it. See how it sounds. You don't know, and people's tastes are different too. And sometimes experimenting like that can provide you additional equalization without an EQ. And that's, again, this is for you to listen to. And so there are rules. But again, the final product is what sounds good to you, and that's what you should do. It's great to learn, you know, what do they say? Read the instructions even if you don't follow them, okay? So that's what you can do in the Loudspeaker Cookbook. But that's what I wanted to talk about. That was one of the most fascinating things that I figured out on my own, was just, I think I put it down, I measured it, and it was by like a knife or something like that, and I noticed that it would change. I put it over there, measured it again, and it was different. I go, what the fuck? And then I realized that because it was steel, because it was ferrous, it was causing it. And then I looked and found out how they make this and do this, and I go, okay, that makes sense, because it was in the field. So it was in the field that there's invisible magnetic, magnetic fields that are going on here, and again, you can change them. Also, if you have leftover cores from other inductors, and you can add them. So now you will change your properties about saturation and power handling and things like that. But again, sometimes you are okay with that compromise, or you're okay with using ferrite instead of steel core laminate or whatever you use. So anyways, that was it. Have a good weekend, guys. I love you.